Personnel selected, Dave, toy restoration expert and YouTuber. Channel codename toy-polloi.
Welcome to toy-polloi. No Legos were harmed in the making of this video.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and this is the second video in a series on restoring this vintage M.A.S.K switchblade from Kenner. Now in the first video you'll have seen that I'd actually fixed up one of the switchblades that I had and got it all working, but I have the remains of another switchblade here that is missing quite a few pieces, and today what we're going to do is actually to make and sort of scratch build some of those missing pieces. Now you can see here this switchblade isn't actually looking too bad already. It has most of the parts, and first up I do need to say thank you to Dave, who supplied the bare bones of this switchblade, and also to Neil, who sent me some of the missing parts. But we need to get it all fixed up, and the first thing I want to do is sort out some of the missing stickers. Now I often show during my videos my use of Photoshop. If you want to see how I go about creating these stickers for this switchblade, then head on over to toy-polloi 2, where I have a dedicated video that shows exactly what I do to get the stickers ready to go on this vehicle. But I have a printout of them here, so the first thing I'll do is just replace the ones that are missing. There's only a few missing actually on this. Most of them seem to be in relatively good condition. There's a bit of damage to the venom stickers on the side, but I'm going to leave those as is. I need to put the stickers on the tail fin, and then there's a couple inside the cockpit that are missing, so I'm just going to quickly apply those. Then we're going to get onto the main part of this video, which is building things like the missing exhausts and also making some propeller blades. And there you go, I've applied these stickers. It immediately makes a massive difference just adding those. It makes it look a more complete toy. And as I say, if you want to see how I went about creating those, head over to my new channel toy-polloi 2, where there is a full in-depth video on the creation of these stickers. Now we need to start work on these exhausts. So let's take a look at what an original one should look like. So this is my complete switchblade, and you can see there are these two nicely chrome plated exhausts that sit on the side. They're a fairly simple shape. You can see they are just sort of triangular shapes made out of two flat surfaces, which is why I think I can make something. In fact, I've already made myself a little prototype, which is this. So this is made out of a few sheets of styrene, and then I've quickly put on a coat of some silver chrome paint just to see what it looks like. So let's test that on my other switchblade and we'll see how it looks. So I can just clip that in place, and you can see that doesn't look bad at all. So this, as I say, was my prototype. From that, I have now made myself a pattern. So basically what I do is I take the shapes that I've made here, take them into Photoshop and create something that I can then use to recreate this piece over and over again. And here is that pattern. I've basically simplified it down to two shapes. So we've got the top surface here and then the under surface here. And you can see this is the prototype version that I made. So that's the top surface and that is the bottom surface. And it seems to fit quite nicely. We do have to add a couple of extra bits once we've constructed this, but this is the basic shape you will need. Everything else we can sort of construct by eye. You don't need a pattern for it. So what I'm going to do is stick this onto two different types of styrene sheet. This simpler piece here, the one on the left, I'm going to stick onto some 1mm styrene sheet because I find that works best. The other piece, the one with the little tab on it, I'm going to be sticking that onto some 2mm styrene sheet. So I have another piece of styrene here. This is 2mm thick, and the reason I'm sticking these onto the styrene is it just makes it easier to cut around because we've got some fairly complicated areas to cut. So I'm going to quickly cut these out roughly and then stick them onto the styrene sheet just using some Pritt stick. So it's not a permanent bond. We can then cut around the shapes and then I can remove the paper template once I'm done with everything. So let's get these stuck onto the styrene and then we can actually start cutting these out properly and constructing these new exhausts. Right, so I've now got all 4 pieces cut out and I've smoothed all of the edges. I'm very happy with how they're looking. I've actually put a slight angle on this outside edge of these top pieces because what we've now got to do is join these together using some plastic weld, and you want a slight angle on it because the final pieces need to be at an angle something like that. To work out the exact angle, we will actually be using the toy itself because we can slot these into the correct holes, and we know that this top piece here, if we slot it into there, needs to lie flat, and then the bottom piece needs to match up with that hole, so we can use that to get the angles as we need. And with plastic weld you have a few minutes before everything sort of goes solid, so I will plastic weld them together and then fit them onto the toy to get them shaped right. And you have to remember we're doing 2 different versions of this. There is a left and a right, so I put the same angle on the other side of this one. So let's get plastic welding. So as you can see, we've now got something that is about the right angle, but it's quite weak because we've only got a very thin strip that's joined together. So I've cut these tiny pieces of styrene, which are the right shape to just fit in there, and we'll add a bit of support. So I'm going to stick those in as well, and that should make it a little bit stronger, which means we can then do a little bit more fine tuning and a bit of sort of filing and sanding down the join. So I'm just going to add those very quickly to both sides just to give it a little bit of extra support. As you can see, these are starting to look like they fit quite nicely. They are the right shape and they do hold in place just about, but we need to actually finish off those clips so that these things stay here rather than falling out as they do at the moment. So what we've got to do first is we'll finish the top clip. So on the top section you can see we have this little tab sticking out, and what we've got to do is add a little lip to that. You can see I've already done it on this one, and to do that all we need to do is cut a very thin strip of 1mm styrene sheet and stick it right on the edge, and that gives it just a little lip, so when you hook this under it's got something to hold on to and you can't pull the top section out. So let's do the same on this one and then we can worry about the bottom clip. So here I have a 1mm thick piece of styrene and I'm just going to cut a 1mm strip off the end. You can do this very easily, it's quite thin, this stuff, so you can easily just score through it with a knife. So there you go, I've now got a tiny 1mm strip of the 1mm styrene. So I've now got to stick this along the top side edge of this exhaust. Again, just a bit of plastic weld. I've made the strip slightly long because it's much easier to sort of hold on to it. We can trim it down once it's in place, and we can line that up and just stick it down like so. Yeah, that looks good. I'll put a little bit more plastic weld just around the edge of it, just to make sure that's nice and firmly attached. Once that's dry, I'll then trim off the excess and that part of the clip is done. To create the clip that goes into the underside hole, I've cut a strip of the 1mm styrene that just fits nicely into that gap there, and what we're going to do is plastic weld this onto the bottom section of the new exhaust, and we have to plastic weld this on the inside. If we put this exhaust in place, you can see that the hole lines up just as the plastic starts to angle back there, so we've got to plastic weld the strip in just right on the end there, and we're doing this on the inside. It doesn't have to be particularly neat, this, because you can't see it, so I'm going to just stick that on like that. We'll let that dry and then we'll trim this piece to match, and again we will have to put on a tiny little lip of the 1mm styrene like that, just a little way down the new piece that we're adding, and that will clip the bottom part in place. So let's plastic weld this one on, and I'll plastic weld a piece onto the other side, and then we can modify those to fit, and then that will be this exhaust all finished. And there you go, you can see I've now trimmed that down, and I put the little piece of 1mm styrene along the end to make a little lip. So we've got a lip on the top and the bottom, and this should now clip in quite nicely onto the switchblade like so. And you can see that those are both firmly held in place, they're not going to come out. The final thing we need to do on them though is to paint them. So I'm going to take these out into my garage. I'm going to give them an undercoat of a plastic primer. I'm then going to paint them black as well, and then on top of that I will be using some of the Stuart Semple silver chrome paint that I've shown before on this channel. So it's a three-stage process. I'm going to do primer, then black paint, and then the silver chrome on top, and I think the end result for those will look really nice. So these have now had a couple of coats of paint. I did a quick undercoat, and then I've done a satin black top coat. I don't actually have a gloss black, which is probably what I should have used, but it'll do the job. Now I'm going to use some of this mirror chrome paint. This is made by Stuart Semple. I've shown this before on the channel a few times, and I'm getting a pretty good result with it now. You apply it with a brush, although I've heard people say that you can use a airbrush if you want to, but supposedly it's supposed to be a brush only. And I've found that you can get some very sort of reasonable chrome results with it. So I'm going to do it very carefully now. Put this on. You want to put on some thin coats of it, nothing too thick. So I've got a nice thin brush here, nice sort of wide thin brush, to try and avoid too many brush strokes, and I'll apply at least one coat of that, and maybe need a couple of bits of touch up just because this is a bit of an awkward shape, but I'm hoping the end result on these will look really nice and chromy. And here we go, here is the final exhaust. I'm very happy with how this turned out. In the end, I did actually respray it. The satin finish, or the sort of the semi-gloss finish that I'd put on using the black paint, didn't give me the result that I wanted. So I resprayed this using a gloss white paint that I had, and then I painted the mirror chrome over the top of it. And as you can see, that's now quite a nice shiny mirror finish. You can see how reflective it is. If I put my hands in front of it, you can clearly see that it's reflecting quite nicely. It's not a perfect match to the original. If I show you the original, you can see the original one is just that little bit shinier, but the overall effect I'm very happy with. They do look exactly like those exhausts, and they clip in really nice and firmly. So I think I'm going to class that part of this project as done. Now we can move on to the missing propeller blades, which is a pretty complicated thing to make, but I've already made a prototype and I'm quite happy with that, so I'll show you how I made those. So here is what an original propeller blade looks like. It's a fairly straightforward shape with a little bit of detail at this end, but it has some quite key holes that need to be cut in it, because these are where it attaches to the ship. So I've already made myself a prototype, and I just have this fitted into my switchblade here. You'll see if I press this button, it clips up quite nicely, and you can see that it does attach as well quite firmly, and we can rotate it and fold it over the top. So if I unclip this, I'll show you what I've made. So that is my version. It's a simplified version of the propeller blade. I haven't put any of the details in because really I don't think you particularly need them. You really just want the overall shape to look like a blade, and this is really at my level of a sort of ability to make. I could put in some more details here, just even scratch something with a scribe, but for now I'm just going to concentrate on making this shape again. So this is made out of some 1.5mm styrene sheet with a little bit of extra styrene stuck at this end and some little sort of pips put on to hold it in place. And now that I've got this prototype, again I've taken this into Photoshop and I've made myself a pattern, and again I've stuck it onto some styrene sheet. So you can see here, this is my pattern. This is a 1.5mm styrene sheet. It's got a very glossy surface and it's got a matte surface. For the moment I've stuck it onto the glossy surface, and this is the underside of the blade. There's a definite top and bottom to the blade. So first thing we need to do is cut this out, and as you can see the outside part of this shape is fairly straightforward to cut out. We can just use a scalpel and a ruler to do that, but we have to cut out these holes, and they are a little bit more awkward. The way I would suggest doing that is drilling holes into the corner of each of these sort of larger holes, and then scoring along the edges, and keep scoring and keep scoring, and in the end it will become thin enough that you can actually push them out. It's a little bit of a complicated thing to do. These larger ones are slightly easier, but the smaller ones at the bottom are a bit awkward. So I'm going to be using a whole selection of tools, including razor saws and all of that, to get these cut out, and this will probably take me about 20 minutes each, and I'm going to tidy them up as I go, so I want all of the edges to be nice and sort of sanded and smooth. So let's get these cut out, and then I'll show you what else we need to do to get them fitted onto the Switchblade. As you can see, I've now got both of those cut out, and the most difficult bit, as I said, is cutting out those holes, but it is possible. They don't have to be particularly neat. We will sort that out at the end. So I've now got my two blades. That is the underside, so that's the side that I stuck the pattern on, and this is now the top side. And what we've got to do on the top side is add a bit of thickness to these little posts at either end. So I've cut some more of the 1.5mm styrene. I've cut a piece that is about the same length as those little sort of arms there, and I've tapered one end of it. So I'm now going to plastic weld those on, so we need one on each of those onto this duller side, and I will get those all plastic welded in place, and then we can do a little bit more tidying up, and then we've just got to add some little pips at the end of these, and that will be the blade shape sort of completed. So yeah, let's get these plastic welded on and let them set. So I've now got those pieces stuck on, and I've started to shape it as well. So you can see I've started to sort of taper the ends and just sort of generally smooth it down and just sort of fine tune it. So we can now test these on the Switchblade, and I have a feeling they are going to still be a little bit problematic. They fit really nicely like that, and you can see that they will sort of do the job, but I think the extra sort of thick bit that I put on there, so the extra bit of 1.5mm styrene, is too long, so I might have to trim off some of the excess either side, because when these fold over they have to sort of, well, sort of, yeah, match up on top of each other. They've got to sort of line up a bit neater. So I think what I've added, it might be a little bit too thick, but it's a good starting point, and the overall shape and the overall effect is going to work quite nicely. Now what we've got to do is actually add a little pip on either side of these new posts. So I've cut myself a very thin piece of styrene, which I can just show you there. So this is the 1.5mm styrene, so I've just cut a very thin strip of it, and the idea is we've got to stick a tiny little bit just on the end there, and I think it's easiest to stick it on as a rod like this, and then we'll trim it down with the plastic nipper. So I've got to end up with a tiny little pip just on the end of there. So I'll do one and show you, and then we'll get the other one done. And then, as I say, I think we might have to do a few little modifications, but the overall effect, as you can see, it's starting to look like a set of propeller blades, and I think they will work quite nicely. But yeah, sometimes with these sort of bits that I build, I change my mind as I go along. I think my prototype one was working quite nicely on its own, but now that we've got two together, we need to do slight modifications to it. But let's get these pips attached, and then we can test it properly. And so here they are finished. I've given them a quick paint as well, so I've done a plastic primer underneath, and then I've used my satin black paint on top just to hide any of the blemishes, and the end result is they're looking really quite nice. Now I did make a few little more modifications to one of these blades. I think both of them actually need doing. The extra bit that I added was just too long, so you can see I've trimmed that down. The problem with it being too long is when these fold on top of each other, there's just too much plastic there. So at some point I'm going to remake both of these with smaller versions of that, but as it is with one modified, it does still work. So let's slot these onto this Switchblade. You can see those little pips fit quite nicely, and we'll do the same on this one. So in the propeller mode, you can see they are sitting quite nicely, and if I press the button on the side, they do spin round. I did add one extra little bit of plastic. You can see there I've added a strip just onto the bar, and the reason for that is without it these blades were actually sitting sort of low. They were bending down when you had it horizontally, and I wanted them to be flush like that. So I'm just adding that little strip has made it so that these sit nice and sort of level, and it means that when you press the button they don't strike anything, they don't hit any part of the Switchblade. And now we can fold it over as well. I have to fold it over in a particular way, because as I say, I've only modified one of these, but these will fold over like that. I can clip that down, and then these will clip in place as well. If I bring the rear fin up like that, let the wings go out, you can see those blades hold in place quite nicely. Now these are by no means perfect, but I actually think they do a pretty good job. Certainly if you wanted to put this on display, having these blades made out of styrene look really quite nice. I don't think they would fool anyone into thinking they were reproduction. They're clearly handmade, but I think overall they do a very nice job. And those in conjunction with the exhausts that I've made really make this a very displayable toy indeed. And there we have it. That is the end of this video. I've made all that I needed to make to get this on display. We have the exhausts and we have the propeller blades. As you can see, sitting them side by side, I think you'd be hard pushed to spot that this had been repaired and all of these pieces had been made from scratch. I still need to find a few bits for this one on the left. I don't have the mask for Miles Mayhem, and I'm also missing the missile, the bomb that goes underneath, although that may be something that I end up making as well, because it's a fairly simple shape and I'm sure I could make something that would work. I do need to say a massive thank you to Theo from Slimehouse TV. He actually sent me the remains of another Switchblade which happened to have the missing landing gear that I needed to complete this one on the left, so thanks to him. If you've enjoyed this video, then why not check out toy-polloi 2, where you'll see the video that I mentioned earlier about creating these stickers for the Switchblade, and also check out the other videos that I have on M.A.S.K toys that I've created over the years. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.